The doctor's voice was calm, almost too calm, the way doctors get when they're delivering news they've practiced saying 100 times. "Mr. Gallagher, you've had a mild stroke. You're stable, but you'll need rest and supervision for the next several weeks." I remember thinking, okay, I can handle this. I'm 67 years old and I've handled worse. What I couldn't handle was what happened next. My daughter was sitting in the chair by the window when the doctor left. She'd driven 40 minutes to get to the hospital, which I appreciated. She was on her phone when I woke up, texting, and she put it face down on her knee when she saw my eyes open. That small gesture, the phone flipping over, I noticed it. I noticed everything in that room. When you're lying in a hospital bed with electrodes on your chest and a blood pressure cuff cycling every 15 minutes, you notice things. "Dad," she said, "you scared us." "I scared myself," I told her. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Her nails were done. Those long acrylic ones she'd started getting about 2 years ago after she stopped working and had more time. Coral pink. I remember that specifically because when she squeezed my hand, one of them pressed into my palm and left a small mark. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. The neurologist came in, explained what a TIA was, explained the medication changes, said I'd need someone checking on me for the first week or so. My daughter nodded along, asked a few questions, wrote something in her notes app. Then her husband called. She stepped into the hallway. I could hear the murmur of their conversation through the thin door. When she came back in, her expression had shifted slightly. Not dramatically, just slightly. "Dad, so here's the thing," she said. "The Hendersons' anniversary party is this Saturday. We've had this on the calendar for months. It's a formal thing, a whole weekend up in Vermont." I waited. "I told Evan you'd probably want us to go ahead, that you'd tell us not to cancel." She looked at me like she was waiting for me to say exactly that. I didn't say it. "You'll be okay here, right? The nurses are great. And you could call Mrs. Abernathy next door if you needed anything at home." I looked at my daughter, my only child, the girl I'd coached through every soccer season until she was 14, the one I'd driven 4 hours each way to help move into her first apartment, the one whose wedding I'd paid for completely because Evan's family contributed exactly nothing. And I said, "Sure, sweetheart, go ahead." She hugged me before she left, the coral nails again. I got home 4 days later in a cab. I want to be clear about something before I go further because this story doesn't make sense without it. My daughter and Evan had not always lived the way they lived when this happened. When they first got married, they were scraping by like normal people. Evan was doing IT work for a mid-sized company, making decent money but nothing spectacular. My daughter had her real estate license and was building a client base slowly. Then her mother passed. That was 4 years ago. Lung cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. I was with my wife every day of those 14 months, and somewhere in that grief, I made a decision that I thought was generous. I decided to help my daughter and Evan get stable so they could be present, so they could visit more, so there'd be less financial stress pulling them in different directions. I gave them $4,500 a month. I told them it was temporary, a couple of years while they got on their feet. I paid off $34,000 of their credit card debt in one lump sum. I bought them a house in Westchester for $590,000. I put it in their names because I thought that was the right thing to do, because I trusted my own daughter. By the time I had my stroke, I had given them just under $200,000 in monthly payments alone, not counting the house or the debt. And they went to Vermont. I spent the first week home alone except for Mrs. Abernathy, who was 73 herself and brought me soup twice and really shouldn't have had to do any of it. My daughter texted. She sent pictures from the party, chandeliers, a dance floor, Evan in a tuxedo looking very pleased with himself. She wrote, "Thinking of you, Dad. Hope you're resting." I was resting. I was resting on the couch with a blood pressure monitor on my wrist and a list of medications I had to take at specific times, and a referral to a cardiologist I needed to schedule, and no one to drive me because my daughter was dancing in Vermont. My friend Arthur came by on day 3. We've been friends since we were both in our 30s, worked at the same engineering firm for 16 years. He's sharp, Arthur. retired now but still sharp in the ways that matter. He sat with me for 3 hours that first visit, helped me organize my medications, drove me to my follow-up appointment. On the way home, he said quietly, "You know this isn't right, what they did." "I know," I said. "You going to do something about it?" I looked out the window at the highway. I'm thinking. I did a lot of thinking in those weeks. Quiet will do that to you. When there's no noise and no obligations and no one dropping by unless they're 73 with a pot of chicken soup, you think. I thought about the house. I thought about the $4,500 I transferred every first of the month. The way I'd set up an automatic transfer so they'd never have to ask, so it would just be there, invisible and reliable, like oxygen. I thought about how I never once asked them what they were spending it on. I thought about the acrylic nails and the Vermont weekend and Evan's tuxedo, and I thought about my will. I called my attorney, a woman named Frances Okafor, who had handled my wife's estate and who I trusted completely. I asked her to come to the house. She did the following Tuesday with her associate, and we spent 2.5 hours going through everything. I changed the will. I set up a trust for my grandson, Evan, and my daughter's boy, 9 years old, named Charlie, the only person in that house who had never done a single thing wrong. The trust would cover his education, his first home, health care if he needed it, completely ring-fenced, protected, nothing his parents could touch. I removed my daughter and Evan as beneficiaries entirely. I also called the bank and stopped the automatic transfer. I didn't tell them I'd done any of this. The first of the month came and went. I was sitting at my kitchen table when my phone rang. It was my daughter. "Dad, I think there's something wrong with the transfer. It didn't come through." "I know," I said. Silence. "What do you mean, you know?" "I mean I stopped it." More silence. Then her voice, different now, the warmth pulled back like a curtain. "Dad, what's going on?" "I've been thinking," I said, "about priorities." She called back 3 times that day. I answered once more, listened to her explain that they had bills, that the mortgage on the Westchester house was structured around the expectation of that monthly support, that I was putting them in a very difficult position. I said I was in a hospital bed and you went to Vermont. She didn't have an answer for that, not a real one. Evan called the next morning. I have to give him a certain amount of credit. He didn't yell, didn't threaten, tried to be reasonable. He said he understood I was upset, that the timing had been bad, that they should have handled it differently. He said they were sorry. I said, "I believe you're sorry the transfer stopped. I'm less certain about the rest of it." He asked if we could sit down and talk about this like adults. I told him my attorney would be in touch. That's when things changed. About 3 weeks after I stopped the payments, I got a certified letter. My daughter and Evan had retained a lawyer, a firm over in White Plains, and they were filing a petition claiming I was mentally incapacitated following my stroke and requesting guardianship over my finances. I sat at my kitchen table and read that letter 3 times. Then I called Frances. "They've done this before," she told me, not unkindly. "Adult children, a parent who's suddenly making different financial decisions, a medical event that can be pointed to. They think a judge will see a confused old man who needs protecting." "I need protecting from them," I said. "I know," she said, "and we're going to prove that." Frances had me see 2 independent neurologists for cognitive assessments. I scored completely normal on both. She gathered my medical records, my financial records, statements from Arthur, from Mrs. Abernathy, from my cardiologist. She documented the $200,000 in support, the house, the debt repayment, the 4 days I spent alone after the stroke while they were in Vermont. The hearing was on a Tuesday in November. I remember the courtroom was smaller than I expected. My daughter sat on the opposite side with Evan and their lawyer, a youngish man in a suit that was slightly too big in the shoulders. She wouldn't look at me when I came in. Evan looked at the table. The judge was a man in his late 50s, heavy-set, glasses, unhurried. He read through the petition. He read through Frances's response. He asked my daughter's lawyer to explain the basis for the incapacity claim. The lawyer cited my stroke, Said I had made erratic financial decisions in its aftermath. Said I had abruptly cut off support that my daughter and her family depended on, which suggested impaired judgment. The judge looked up from his papers. He stopped giving them money, he said. Not a question, a clarification. He stopped a financial arrangement they had come to rely on, Your Honor, following a medical event that. How much had he given them over the past 4 years? There was a pause. The lawyer said, there were various. Approximately, the judge said. I watched my daughter's jaw tighten. Francis stood up. Your Honor, Mr. Gallagher provided approximately $197,000 in direct monthly payments over 44 months, in addition to the purchase of a $590,000 home currently deeded to the petitioners and a one-time payment of $34,000 to retire their consumer debt. Following a stroke, during which the petitioners were in Vermont attending a social function, Mr. Gallagher spent 4 days recovering at home without family assistance. He subsequently made the independent decision to discontinue the monthly payments and revise his estate plan. 2 independent neurological assessments, both conducted within the past 6 weeks, confirm he is fully cognitively competent. There is no basis for this petition. The judge looked at the 2 neurologist reports. He looked at my daughter's lawyer. He said, Counselor, I'm looking at 2 clean cognitive assessments and a man who made a financial decision his family didn't like. That is not incapacity. That is called being an adult. He denied the petition. He ordered my daughter and Evan to pay $9,500 in legal fees, mine, within 90 days. The lawyer tried to say something. The judge said, we're finished here, and that was it. In the hallway afterward, my daughter came toward me. Evan hung back. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, which I suspected was true. Dad, she said, can we just? Not today, I said. Francis walked me to Arthur's car. Arthur had driven me. On the way home, he said, well? Petition denied, I said. They owe me $9,500. He laughed, a short, dry sound. They don't have $9,500. No, I said, they don't. My phone started ringing before we got to the highway. I turned the volume off and watched the exits go by. That evening, I sat in my living room, the house I'd owned for 22 years, the house where my wife and I had raised our daughter, the house with her old bedroom still set up the same way it was when she left for college, because for years I couldn't bring myself to change it. And I listened to the voicemails. There were 11. The first few were my daughter, controlled and formal, saying she wanted to talk, that she thought they could work this out. By the 6th, she was crying. By the 9th, she was saying things I won't repeat. The 11th was Evan, very quiet, just, you've destroyed our family. I hope you know that. I deleted them all. I made copies first, saved them to a cloud folder Francis had recommended, then deleted them. I sat there for a long time after that. Here's what I want to say about the weeks that followed. Because people assume that when you win something like this, you feel triumphant. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. I felt the particular exhaustion of a man who has spent 4 years being slowly, quietly taken for granted, and then spent several more months fighting to be seen clearly. Arthur kept me company. We had dinner twice a week, alternating whose house. He's a good cook, Arthur. Makes a braised short rib that his wife taught him 30 years ago, and he's been making ever since. We watched baseball. We talked about things that had nothing to do with any of this. Charlie called me once a week. My daughter didn't know. Or maybe she did and allowed it, I'm not sure. He was 9 and he missed me, and he called from his bedroom. We talked about his soccer team, about a book he was reading at school, about the fact that he wanted a hamster and his parents kept saying no. I told him I'd take him to a Yankees game in the spring. He said, promise? And I said, promise. And I said, promise. About 6 weeks after the hearing, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It turned out to be my daughter, calling from her work phone. I almost didn't pick up. I called from this number because I thought you might not answer my regular one, she said. That was smart. I said. She laughed, a strange, worn-out little laugh. Dad, I've been thinking a lot. Okay. I know we were wrong. About Vermont, about all of it. I think I let Evan talk me into things I knew weren't right, and I told myself it was fine, and it wasn't fine. She paused. I think I also knew the money wasn't going to last forever, and I just didn't want to think about it, which isn't an excuse. No, I agreed. It isn't. I'm not calling to ask for anything, she said quickly. I know that's what you'd expect. I needed to tell you that I understand why you did what you did. I don't think you're being vindictive. I think I showed you who I was when it mattered, and it wasn't who you deserved. I was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? I said. Yes. When you were sitting in that hospital room and I told you to go ahead to Vermont, did you know when you drove away that it was wrong? A long pause. Yes, she said. That was the most honest thing she'd said to me in years, maybe longer. I told her I wasn't ready to move forward yet, that I needed more time, that I'm sorry was a beginning, not a destination. She said she understood. She sounded like she meant it. We hung up. I sat by the window with my coffee and thought about my wife, who had always been better at this than I was, better at seeing past the frustration to the person underneath, better at holding two true things at once. I thought about what she would have said if she'd been alive for any of this. I thought she would have said, give her a chance, but make it a real one, with real expectations, not the kind you keep lowering until there's nothing left. The house in Westchester went on the market 2 months after the hearing. They couldn't keep up the property taxes, $14,200 a year without the monthly support. It sold for $612,000 after their remaining debts, which had piled up with credit cards and a personal loan they'd taken out sometime in the past year. They cleared enough to buy a smaller place in a less expensive town and have something left over. Evan got a second job. I heard this through Charlie, who mentioned that Dad's working nights now too. I didn't ask follow-up questions. I just filed it away. My daughter went back to her real estate license. She'd let it lapse, but the renewal process isn't insurmountable. She was working for a small office in the new town, building back up. Charlie told me she was tired a lot, but seemed less mad. He said it the way kids say things, straightforwardly, without realizing how much information they're conveying. In March, my daughter asked if she could bring Charlie to see me. Just Charlie and her, not Evan. I respected that she'd read the room. They came on a Saturday. Charlie burst through the door and hugged me around the middle the way he's done since he could walk, and I held on longer than I usually do. He smelled like the outside, like he'd been running around in the parking lot on the way in, which he probably had. My daughter stood in the doorway. She looked thinner. She looked older. She looked like someone who had been carrying something heavy and was setting it down slowly, not sure of her footing yet. "Thanks for letting us come," she said. "Of course," I said. We had lunch. I'd made sandwiches, nothing elaborate. I'm not much of a cook. Charlie ate 3 of them and told me at length about a video game I have no understanding of. My daughter and I talked around the edges of things for a while. Not about money, not about the hearing, not about Vermont, about Charlie's school, about a documentary she'd been watching, about whether the Yankees had any hope this season. After lunch, I took Charlie out to the garage. I've been restoring an old Craftsman workbench I found at an estate sale. Not glamorous like a vintage car, but it's given me something to do with my hands since the stroke. Something small and manageable. I showed him how to use a hand plane. He was surprisingly patient about it for a 9-year-old. When I came back inside, my daughter was washing the lunch dishes. I stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment watching her. "You don't have to do that," I said. "I know," she said. She didn't stop. We sat at the kitchen table afterward, just the 2 of us. Charlie back in the garage, experimenting with the hand plane under strict instructions not to touch the chisels. "I'm not changing the will back," I said. "I want you to know that. The trust for Charlie stays as it is." She nodded. She'd expected this. "And I'm not restarting the monthly payments. That's over. I know, Dad. What I am willing to do, I said, is this. I want to see Charlie regularly. I want him in my life. And I'm open to seeing you, the way we're doing today, and seeing whether things are genuinely different. But I need it to actually be different. Not a performance, not temporary, actually different. She looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't let it spill over. I know the difference, she said. I'm not asking you to trust me yet. I just want the chance to earn it back. That was the right answer. It wasn't a promise to be perfect. It wasn't asking me to forget. It was asking for a chance and qualifying it honestly. I told her we could try. That evening, after they left, Arthur called to check in. He does this now, a habit he picked up when I was recovering. I told him how the visit had gone. You think she's really changed? He asked. I don't know yet, I said. I know she said the right things. Whether the right things become the right actions, that's a longer answer. You're a more patient man than I am, he said. I'm 67 years old and I had a stroke, I said. I don't have the energy for grudges anymore. But I'm also not stupid. He laughed. No, you never were. I hung up and sat in my living room in the quiet. The house felt different than it did a year ago. Less like a place I was enduring and more like a place I'd reclaimed. My medications were organized on the counter. My next cardiology appointment was in the calendar. I was sleeping better. I thought about what I'd told Evan on the phone, back when he'd said I destroyed the family. I hadn't destroyed anything. They'd built a life on money that wasn't theirs to keep, and when the money stopped, the structure they'd built around it revealed itself. That's not destruction. That's just what was always true, finally visible. My daughter, if she was serious about changing, would have to build something real, with Evan or without him, or in whatever shape their marriage took from here. That was between them. But if she wanted her way back into my life, it would be on terms I set, not terms she negotiated when I was too grief-stricken over her mother to say no. The workbench in the garage needed 2 more weekends of work before it would be done. Charlie had asked if he could be there when I finished it. I'd said yes. Some things take time. Some things, if you do them right, turn out better than the original. I was finding out which kind this was. I've been sitting with this for a while now, and I keep coming back to the same image. My daughter's coral pink nails pressing into my palm in that hospital room, and her walking out the door 20 minutes later to pack for Vermont. That's the moment everything clarified for me, not the stroke itself, not the certified letter from the lawyer in White Plains, not even sitting alone in my house for 4 days with a blood pressure monitor and a neighbor who shouldn't have had to bring me soup. It was that small pressure in my palm, and then the absence. What I've come to understand is that the consequences didn't happen to my daughter and Evan. They happened because of choices they made, one after another, over years. There's a difference. I didn't punish them. I simply stopped absorbing the cost of their decisions. The house went on the market because they couldn't maintain something they hadn't earned. Evan took a second job because reality doesn't negotiate. My daughter went back to her real estate license because she had no other option. None of that was my doing. That was the natural weight of things returning to where it belonged. But here's what I think about more than the consequences, what it took for me to finally act. Because I knew, somewhere, for a long time, I knew the arrangement had gone wrong. And I kept the payments going, kept quiet, kept telling myself it was generosity. What it actually was, if I'm honest, was the easier thing. Setting limits with people you love is one of the hardest things a person can do. It requires you to be clear about what you value, and then to hold that line even when someone you raised is on the other side of it crying. That's not cruelty. That kind of clarity is its own form of integrity, and I've been avoiding it for years. The petition they filed, trying to have me declared incompetent, forced me to prove something I should never have had to prove, that I understood my own decisions, that I was thinking clearly. Francis put 2 neurologists in front of a judge, and the results were clean. But what struck me sitting in that courtroom was simpler than any legal standard. I'd always been thinking clearly. I'd just been choosing comfort over honesty for too long. My daughter is doing the harder work now. Whether it holds, I don't know yet. What I do know is that she told me the truth when I asked her directly. She knew Vermont was wrong when she drove away. That took something to admit. It's a small thing, but small, honest things matter more than large, comfortable lies, and I've learned to tell the difference. Charlie still calls me every week. He wants a hamster, and I'm still telling him to keep asking. I promised him a Yankees game, and I keep my promises. That boy didn't ask for any of what happened around him, and he carried it with the kind of steadiness that 9-year-olds somehow manage when adults fall apart. If there's anyone in this story who got things right from the beginning, it's him. The workbench is finished now. It turned out well, solid, level, better than I expected when I started. Some things are like that.